Union, the University of Nottingham, I accept that invitation. In 2014, she said the far too rarely heard words, "Gender equality is your issue too. It's men's issue too." But it too was men's issue when in 1792, Mary Wollstonecraft coined her famous work, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, but was ridiculed by the popular press and laughed out of Parliament. It too was men's issue when in 1819, working women for the first time ever stroke against low pay and long hours but were met with violence. So in many ways it comes as no surprise today that this same campaign is met by people who try and downplay its importance. We've heard those arguments before, haven't we? That feminism, it's not needed here, it's not relevant. Not in this country, not in this city, not at this university. Perhaps in Africa it's relevant, where 125 million women and girls alive today have suffered the ordeal of genital mutilation. Or perhaps it's relevant in the Middle East, where 37% of women will experience physical or sexual violence from their partner in their lifetimes. But not here, it's not relevant in this country, this city, or this university. But I say feminism is relevant and needed in the UK, this city, and this university. It's needed in the UK, where women make up 51% of the population, but only 30% of MPs. And it's needed in this city, where in 2013, Nottinghamshire police received 10,000 calls about domestic abuse. And it's needed at this university, where our female students are still met with sexual harassment in nightclubs, and there exist cultures that exist solely to espouse sexual discrimination. However, many of you here will need no lectures from me on the merits or the history of feminism. But for those of you who are new to the movement, who, like me, perhaps wouldn't pick feminism as their mastermind subject, but have the same feeling that I did in their guts, that something about gender inequality is wrong, it's the purpose of this speech to introduce you to the role of men, to the advancement of equality for all gender identities at this university. And in the spirit of introductions, my name is Rob Jennings, and I'm a feminist. I listened to Emma's words and remembered a time where my sense of male success was distorted. I remembered when I acted in a way that didn't feel true to myself in the presence of male peers. When I told myself that the solution to depression was simply to man up. The liberation of gender is by nature mutually dependent. We as men, the husbands who depend on our wives, the sons who depend on our mothers, the brothers who depend on our sisters, owe it to ourselves and to women to cure the ills of sexism by curing our own. The sooner we can learn to understand and be open about what it really means to be male, we can understand the effect our actions have on those who are not. It was a year ago that I decided to run to be a Students' Union officer. And while Emma's words resonated with me at the time, it seemed quite fitting that my personal path and that of the campaign should meet again at this moment, where I have the privilege of addressing you guys in this audience and speaking alongside the guest speakers we have today, who we are delighted to welcome onto our campus. I became involved in this campaign where I saw two of my female colleagues. They were working on a project. I asked them what it was, and they said it was HeForShe. And something felt wrong that in a campaign called HeForShe, as a Students' Union officer team, there was no male presence on it. In that moment, I pledged my support to it in any way that I could. In this moment, I'll pledge you to offer yours as well. I'm personally indebted to the leadership of women for setting the wheels in motion and facilitating my being here today. We've seen this leadership throughout history, in the LGBT movement, the trans movement, and the BME movement. But I'll admit that I felt slightly in the deep end when I was asked to speak on this matter. Believe it or not, I've never spoken on feminism before. And this for me is kind of what HeForShe is all about. The fundamental reason is that there is a lack of male participation in the movement for gender equality that in many ways can't succeed without it. Because when we talk about gender issues, too often we just think about women. But what happens when I become fed up with gender inequality as well? When men as well say that enough is enough? This is where we fill the void left by a lack of male role models by making them. where we as a student body have the opportunity to make a decision about the environment we want to call our home, and where we as men and male students enter the conversation. But how do we facilitate this call of action? Part of the solution comes in finding the men who are willing to stand up and be counted. Those who are willing to be the leaders in this movement. But what does male leadership and gender equality look like? Is it just about standing up and making speeches, or is it about what we take away and do in our everyday lives? When the interests of women are defended when none are present, that's where I see a leader. When a man has the courage to stand up to another man and correct their behaviour, that's where I personally see a leader. And on this campus, in this auditorium, I see potential for leaders. The other half of the solution relies on us, the existing participants in this movement, to welcome these new leaders. Because this is a campaign of education, essentially. And as university students, if there's one thing we know, or hopefully we should know about, it's education. I study ancient history. When I arrived for my first lecture, my tutor didn't sit me down and tell me to do my third year finals. What he asked me was to be open-minded, to be committed, and to be willing to learn. When Emma Watson extended her invitation to men and boys around the world, she cast the net wide. She appealed to those inadvertent feminists, the influence who, without knowing, had made a positive difference to gender equality. She didn't ask they know how to speak correctly on the topic, nor they knew the history of the feminist movement. All she asked was that they were willing to be a part of its future. I speak from experience when I say that there are men who, like I did, had that gut feeling that gender inequality is wrong. But too often, these men, in their continued silence, speak volumes about how welcome they feel in the feminist movement. They're scared that in today's climate, it is easier to become a part of the problem than it is a part of the solution. If we are truly to mobilise men to act on behalf of and with women, then we first need to dispel the myth that we are not accommodating for their help. We must ensure that if we are to welcome men in through the gates, they are not met with pitchforks. So I implore you, when welcoming men on behalf of the HeForShe campaign, to ask only for those three things that are necessary to facilitate education: an open mind, a committed spirit, and a willingness to learn. When we find our male champions and we greet them with open arms, then we will find that the balance tips not to one way nor the other, but to equality. So join us on October 7th at our student meetings and lend your voice to the movement. Thank you.